once again to this platform where we will be talking about subjects relating to peering and interconnectivity in Central Africa. Today, we're all joined here, and I would like to thank the panelists and for taking this time to speak to us on subjects that are related to Central Africa and in particular peering and interconnectivity. And my name is Ghislain, and I'm from the Internet Society, and today I will be, it's my job here to welcome you here to this session, to this forum. And without further ado, I would like to invite Jean-Baptiste from the Internet Society to share some words of welcome. Thank you, Jean-Baptiste. Thank you, Ghislain. And thank you to all participants for joining us. My name is Jean-Baptiste Millogo, and I'm from the Internet Society and responsible for development and internet technologies. And I hope that I will be able to give you some useful insights in these discussions on this forum on Central Africa. The peering community and the community itself. I would also like to thank the sponsors and thank all of you for joining us from wherever you are in the world. The Internet Society is very pleased to have everyone together to contribute to this discussion about the Internet and to improve the Internet for all our members in Central Africa. It is our aim at the Internet Society to support this development. Thank you. What are the objectives of this meeting? Well, we want to highlight the obstacles of that are in the way that prevent development and growth of the peering and interconnectivity infrastructure. And we would also like to draw attention to the key actors in this field and the roles that they play. We will also be sharing our experience of various from various locations, and so that way we can exchange more facts and information. So there are obviously some rules for engaging in this session, which will be recorded and then available later, but is also being broadcast live on social media. And you please be respectful and responsible when you're engaging in this meeting. And can you please ask you brief questions that are direct and simple, and when doing so, please place your name and your country before your question. Click here to familiarize yourself with the code of conduct. Thank you. So how to get involved? Well, you have a social media hashtag what you can use. FPA, the CAPF 2022, and thanks to our partners, we have interpretation in English, and all you have to do is look at the Zoom screen and connect to the English channel to follow this. Please ask your chat room is for discussing issues with other participants, but please ask your questions in the Q&A. And as I said, it won't be just me moderating this session. I am joined by Landry Lingombe, and he is going to share this role with me, and therefore I would like to hand over to him to allow him to introduce himself. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Landry Lingombe. I'm responsible for the Gabon IXP, and I'm very grateful to everyone who's here at this event. As Jean-Baptiste said, the subject of this event will be the obstacles to improving infrastructure to interconnectivity and peering in Central Africa. There will be 4 panelists. We must also thank the sponsors. So that's Team Simru with Samuel Muchiri, PEX, Wouter van Hilton. We would also like to thank Meta, Ben Ryle, and Andrew Basket, and also FranceIX with Bryce Abba. And I would like to thank also Flex Optics, Fergus Mackay and Portia Rabunda for the interpretation, without whom it would not be possible to offer interpretation. As I said, there will be 4 main panelists. We have Samuel Triolet from FranceIX, and he's very experienced in internet exchange points, and he's going to share that experience with us. We also have Chancelle Mbara, who is from the Republic of Congo, who will give us the viewpoint from the public sector and the use of IXPs. And the third panelist is Eustache Safari, who is the director of MDICIS and specialist in the development of applications and content creation. And then we have Guichard Tsangou, who is the director of at ECCAS of Posts and Telecommunications, and he will talk about a project, an action plan for developing infrastructure in Central Africa. So before we continue, I'm going to bring up a survey. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to Jean-Baptiste, who's going to share that with us. We're going to have a survey on the screen, and it's a survey that will give us an insight to the participants that we have at this session. Please take your time to answer the questions. You will see it will just gradually appear on the screen. The answers will appear on the screen. ISP providers, engineering services, IT services, the participants from other sectors of companies. And this survey, as you can see, you can see the professional profiles of the participants in this session and who we will be talking to, which should help us to have a better insight into the involvement and the action that we need to take. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first panelist who's going to discuss his subject. Thank you. First of all, as I said, our first panelist is Samuel Triolet from FranceIX. He is over to you, Samuel. Good afternoon, everyone. And so just preparing my slides on the screen. So my aim today is to share my experiences in Central Africa and share some findings and perhaps some solutions that we can look at from my experience that I can share with you. IXP, of course, is a local solution, and it's not a solution that's a magical one for everywhere. But you know the size here, Africa, you know the size of the continent and the French-speaking countries within it. So we have fixed line access in Africa, but there's no surprise to see that Africa is not the most connected continent. And we can also see that there are very few ASN, and it's something we need that for for creating peering pairs and increasing interconnectivity, and therefore limits the number of IXPs in Africa. And we can also see that the population is not very well covered. We hope to improve this, and it is actually improving because the capacity has increased fivefold between 2017 and 2021, and countries that have the largest data centers are actually in Africa, and in terms of the market, many of the main players are starting to become interested in Africa because it's a very big market. Okay, so some preliminary issues. I'm sure that you share my view that an IXP is not a technical project. It's not the approach we need to take. It's a question of developing an area, and it's important for the sovereignty and independence of your country. And it's of any infrastructure. It's one of the smaller projects. It's not very visible, like an airport, for example. IXPs are still in a not very well developed in the ECCAS countries, and so perhaps we could say without IXP it would be okay to continue, but without that we can't. It's much more difficult to develop businesses and develop a local value for the economy, and without IXPs it breaks down into two words. There's a local network and not an internet network. So what are the main problems before? First of all, there's a lack of infrastructure, data centers in Central Africa. There aren't many landing points for cables that are accessible, easily accessible. There are some landing centers, but they're not. But they're usually controlled controlled by one operator. There's a lack of information and training to drive the creation of IXPs. There are also monopolies that have too much influence, and perhaps it may be a case that language is an issue, because this French is a sixth language in the internet, over the internet. But also some infrastructures are there, so actually it should work. As I was talking to you before about ASN numbers, the area that interests us is highlighted in green, and we can see that there are very few ASNs per country highlighted. So, in fact, there's only one player that's actually done a border gateway protocol, and therefore have various routes to transfer data from their areas. So that needs to improve. That's quite simple. I mean, it has to be explained to the operators, to potential consumers, that they must use their IP addresses. And so the language is another issue. In terms of the competition, if we look at English-speaking countries and French-speaking countries, we can see that there's 189 members on compared to 1,603 on English IXPs. There are fewer than an average of 9 members in French-speaking IXPs, but 46 in English IXPs. It's quite a difference between of those created in 2010 and those created in 2015. But what we can see most of all is the difference in traffic, 470,000 gigabit. And when you compare that to 2 million, over 2 million for English-speaking IXPs, we can see that the gap is even wider. So maybe it's a question of attitude, or perhaps a cultural matter that hinders our progress, and IXPs have to work with each other. We can see that there are 19 countries without any IXP, and some have fewer than 10, and it's difficult to obtain information. For example, Tunisia it actually has an IXP, but it's not shown on the map. So it's difficult to obtain information. Often IXPs are considered like as a technical project, but in fact that's a misconception. So within the ECCAS area, we have 11 IXPs, but there are still 4 countries that have no IXP, and there are 4 with just 1. And there are 3 countries with 2 IXPs, but also with POPs as well. The DRC, who has 1 IXP, for example. Just a moment. Just a moment while I adjust.
Bon, j'ai complètement perdu la main sur mon Landry, excusez-moi.
I'm sorry, I don't have the control over the slides here. Perhaps I'll leave it there. The obstacles to developing IXPs, some countries have decided that they need to regulate this with licenses, and this license is actually very limiting. There are also limited AS access because there are certain organizations within this regulatory environment that are controlling this. And so they're limiting this to internet access providers. And there are also operators who are well established who do not want to connect to IXPs. And then there are also CDNs that are not interested in low population areas. And as I said, there are technical problems and too much monopoly over the transfer of data. An IXP is a community. It's access providers, and it's not easy to because they're competitors amongst themselves. Partnership is what's required. So the access, internet service providers are not we need more clients for an IXP, not just providers of access. So let's make a small comparison. An airport connects lots of different areas. However, an IXP has to many areas collaborating together, but there can be they need to work together, or else the IXP will not work properly. It's also very it's interesting for exchanging data, but it's for exchanging traffic, but it's also it has to be commercially viable traffic, and without peering, peering, but it's not going to create a profitable IXP over the long term. Potential solutions is the last point here is the most important. I know Africa quite well, and I would say perhaps there's some errors to avoid. It's a local project, and it's because local knowledge will be essential, and it requires finance, and it will never really be profitable without that. And an airport, for example, to use that parallel, perhaps won't be profitable in the long term. The structure must be transparent and allow exchange with other IXPs. When there are good ideas, it's good to share them. And all actors within that IXP must be treated in the same way, as if they were Google or a local hospital, and never members should never compete amongst each other. And that it works well with a small team, a director, manager who understands the technology and who knows how to manage it. And IXPs will take about 5 to 10 years to develop, and you need to find someone who's going to stay. We need a technical director. You need to do some marketing to manage the essential aspects of running an IXP for local events and international events. And you need at least one, ideally 2 POPs. And even if you're to make $1 million, I can't be sure that, you need to be there for the long term. That's my contribution. And once again, I would like to I don't know if what I've told you could work where you are, but I really hope. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Samuel. It's always a pleasure to listen to the people with experience. And I've just a question for you. The IXP that you've talked to, it's not technical. There's more a question of governance but what I'd like to ask you is, we can see that there are lots of IXPs in Africa, but we've also found that find it difficult to develop. And in 2022, what I want to talk about content. What could you tell us about a strategy for implementing for an IXP that is struggling to take off, that has the content, but that have the players who are keen to get involved? What can you tell us about? What can you tell us about that? Well, I think that, well, in fact, every country does things differently. So it's not impossible to create local content and share it over the internet. I can't remember the name of the country, where TV was streamed from Canada, and I thought this was quite funny. And in fact, the Canadian TV had decided to be hosted locally. So if internet only works in one direction, you will only have consumers that are spending quite a lot to be and not bringing value to your area. And it's a shame that to remain in this kind of mindset, because it's really a question of getting actors together and can change attitudes that, perhaps an IXP, I can't see the point of them. And it's really, in the example I'm giving you, it's a very small town, and we had to really battle to get the IXP established. There would be many people happy to see an IXP installed, especially in the local populations. As I was saying, there's not a miracle solution for creating an IXP, but if you don't have the cornerstone and the certainty of, then you will, with an IXP, you will not create value in your country. So you have to highlight them, focus on. Yes, I mean, it's not, if you have to make the IXP work, but the challenge is to, you need people who are on board with this idea. And if you, once that's the case, then it's easier to implement an IXP. The technical aspect is important, of course, but if it doesn't work commercially, then it's not going to be sustainable. You have to find your users and have an open mind to go look for these users in your country, and that's essential. And you have to motivate the local players to come to the IXP and leave the door open to many other IXPs. Like Leon IX, we had all different players. We had companies, hospitals, cement producers, and when there's a great mix, the traffic will increase. And in that respect, it was a real internet. It was connected to other networks because these networks were connected directly. They weren't going via the United States, and it's practically free. Thank you. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you once again.
Now, we'll certainly return to this with the different participants, but to continue, I would like to present our next panel member, and I would like to invite Jean-Baptiste to introduce her. Thank you very much, Landry. Thank you, Samuel, for setting the scene. Now we've got a good scene, it's well set. Now let's move on to the second speaker, Chancelle, Mbara, and Nkoussou. Chancelle has a foot within administration because she's head of service for the Post and Electronic Communication Regulatory Agency in the Republic of Congo, but she also was involved in the setup of the Congolese IXP and in the development of a domain and domain provision system. So she's going to be able to tell us more about the place public administrations can have with IXPs and interconnections. Chancelle, the floor is yours. Hello, thank you very much to Jean-Baptiste for inviting me to take the floor. Thank you also for the time you're dedicating and to this interesting forum. The topic I would like to consider today is what are the benefits for public bodies to be connected to IXPs? To tackle this topic, I'm going to look at the content that administrations can find, which could be necessary, and what the benefits are. Nowadays, in town halls, there are resources such as supplying identity papers, producing birth certificates, marriage certificates, etc. So this, in fact, is content which ought to be digitized and which will create local content and also make users' lives easier. For something which required going to town hall, for instance, to declare the birth of a child, well, once these elements are digitized, it's much easier to access the documents faster. So it makes it easier to have access to these resources without a huge internet capacity. And if administrations are connected to IXPs, they'll have an easier and faster access to such infrastructures. Aside from internal services mentioned, you also have emails, staff management applications, accountancy apps, and all sorts of business solutions that businesses and public administrations can move to a digital format in order to facilitate a swifter, easier, and more affordable access to these necessary tools. The connection is lost. So why connecting to an IXP? Well, first of all, it empowers administrations. Otherwise, if they need to go via an internet service provider or an internet provider to access what they need, And if they need to change suppliers for internet, then it's a huge amount of work. By connecting to an IXP, gives you a chance to have a stable address. And once you're connected to an IXP, it's much easier to access all necessary resources. We've got WACS in Congo, and if we've got public administrations connected, if there's an issue with WACS, well, it remains transparent and easier for users to access the services they need. Besides, end users have an easier journey to access what they need. So for administrations not yet connected to IXPs, remember that it means your users have to get to a physical location to access services. And then, people might get there and the person from whom they need a signature might not be there. So IXP connection enables you to optimize and streamline your operations and be more efficient. It's facilitating access for users. Besides, it facilitates creation of your own network. Accessing an IXP makes it easier to access internet resources. And then there's also the organization of your internal network, which is facilitated by a better internet access. Well, you can organize your network as you want, of course, but you've got this added facility because you can more easily deploy internal services, which must be visible online because you have your own internet resources to facilitate this process. Additionally, capacity is reinforced. You need this capacity building in terms of network administration, and I'm talking about the BGP protocol, which is the core management protocol for IXPs. And it really contributes to capacity development, capacity building. There's also the networking aspect. The IXP enables you to communicate with the members of the IXP to share your experiences, but also the challenges you may encounter. For instance, nowadays, when I'm with a group of professionals, I can very easily have some feedback or some suggested solutions to a problem that would be more tricky to solve on my own. So the networking dimension is very important. There's also the advantage of a reduced cost of access to international bandwidth, because quite a lot will be dealt locally. So you have access to these local resources at a much cheaper cost than if you had to go through an international connection to access any content or any resources. It also reduces latency time. An email could take 1 minute to get to its destination in the past, but if sender and receiver are connected to the IXP, the time will be much reduced because it's a local pathway. When we go through the international bandwidth and try and send a 2 meg file, the time it takes to download the document is much longer than if you're transiting through an IXP. You can also ensure more continuity of service provision. So if the international pathway doesn't work through the WACS network, the pathway which routes out of the country is a problem. If it's cut, but you've got an IXP, a local network, then the problem isn't there anymore, and you can ensure continuity of service. And it will enhance the image, the positive image of the administration, because services remain available. Let me give you the DRC example. there's a Facebook and a Google Cache hosted by the IXP, meaning that all the resources are accessible locally, and local users get access via Facebook or Google directly. They don't need to go through external routes to source this from the US, for instance. There are many advantages to peering through IXPs. And as public administrations, there is a huge interest in engaging in peering. Now, there might be some reluctance. It's not quite as easy to engage in peering if you're not a member of an IXP, because being a member of an IXP facilitates cooperation, generates trust. Nowadays, if you are a member of an IXP, and if you have content, you can contact Google or Facebook easily. And there's a different perspective than if you were dealing directly with an ISP. So it really facilitates access to content. It's also increasing visibility online. We have DB peering platforms which highlight the different IXPs of a country, and at the same time, they bring attention to the members connected to these IXPs. So DB peering is a platform which lists all the IXPs in the world, the members connected, the IXP addresses, etc. So it makes you more visible as a public administration. Furthermore, it supports development and digitization of services. It makes it much easier to put services online. And at the same time, we know that there are users within the administrations, but there are also users through IP or ISPs or members of the IXP who could better access the services, appreciate the ease of access, the reduced latency time, and the reduced need for internet capacity to access resources. So there are many, many positive elements, many benefits, which stem from connecting to an IXP for public administrations. There's a huge interest in being member of an IXP rather than operating in a silo. We've entered the digital era, and I think that IXPs can be real catalysts for public administrations. It will help them to digitize their services and to move on from this old-fashioned way, which required users to physically get to a building to access services of an administration. You can access them now online, and it's much easier. In many countries already, you can solve administrative procedures remotely, online. It removes the need to physically go to the administrative building. So I'm insisting there are so many benefits for public administrations to join IXPs. And there's another thing you mustn't forget. It helps you make up for the lack of internal capacity or the lack of configuration. This need not be, this lack of technology or know-how does not need to be an issue, because IXPs can provide you the support, the help. It starts with the provision of IP addresses, and FranceIX is there to help you get what resources you need internet-wise. You can get help and assistance all the way along, including for speccing the technology you need. There's also guidance on the deployment of connections at the IXP. There's support for the BGP configuration. So don't let lack of knowledge of resources be a hindrance. For instance, I've supported colleagues in Cameroon, in DRC, in Gabon, in Cameroon, kind of everywhere across Africa. We want to stress that in Africa, we still have a bit of a delay or reluctance to engage, and we need to jump on the bandwagon and join IXPs so that we don't fall behind and remain on the margins of this digital era. Thank you very much, Chancelle. Thank you for pointing at this need for a digital transformation which should be accessible locally through IXPs. With your many CAPs, I think we've benefited from a very rich and wide overview of a matter. Now, to develop a few points, in your view, based on your experience, what could be the best approach for public networks who want to join an IXP? Is it a case of each person coming to connect, to break the sort of silo mentality, or should we have a sort of federal approach to have one IXP connection for administrations? What do you think would be best for administrations? Chancelle, what do you think? Well, I would say that what would make the most sense would be to come to the IXP as a group, because if it's an individual approach, there'll be more financial constraints, a greater need for resources. So if you do so as a group of administrations, you'll save on access costs. It will also facilitate inclusion and integration of all technical administrative resources in one point. And it will enable you to have one vision. So I would suggest a group team approach would be more coherent and facilitate a cohesive access to resources. It would also be more economical for all administrative services. It would be faster as well. And the process and connection would end up costing less. I'm talking about the cost of connecting to the IXP. So yes, consider a group approach. I mean, of course, it's difficult to bring all administrations together around one pole, in a sense. It may be challenging. You could maybe start from a governmental policy imposing this group approach, or you could have a couple of administrations working as a pilot connection scheme. Thank you very much, Chancelle. Very interesting, and thanks for clarifying the need to bring efforts and administrations together so that they have a joint approach to IXP connection. Thank you very much. Please stay with us. We're going to continue with the next member of the panel, but thank you for your contribution and for the excellent insight you've given us. I would now like to invite my co-chair to introduce the next panel member for this peering forum for Central Africa. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste. It was indeed very interesting to hear Chancelle. Now, I would like to pass the floor to our next speaker, Eustache Safari is the founder and director of MDICIS, a company which focuses on digital content. MDICIS benefits from real experience from its inception and the development of its services. So I would like to invite all participants to pay attention to this intervention, because it will give us an insight in MDICIS and its pathway, the challenges faced, the route that Eustache followed. So Eustache, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Landry. I'm going to share my presentation on the screen. Right. First of all, thank you for inviting me to take the floor. MDICIS is a company focused on digital content and was created in 2014. We focus on content production, application development for management and mobile apps. We've looked at digital content such as MMS, messages, audio, video, and we've also developed training and support for companies. So we're looking at digitizing digital solutions for companies. Now, sorry. Now, this didn't happen overnight. There were challenges to overcome. And to name some of the challenges we faced, first of all, our consumers at the moment turn towards external content produced in other countries. And there are offers from external platforms. So the real challenge in digitizing is also payment. In African countries, in particular in the DRC, online payment or electronic payment is in its inception. There were issues also with hosting infrastructures. When we started, a large-scale digitization, we posted our solution on the cloud. It was easier, cheaper, but the key drawback was that there was a huge latency time, so people were not interested in accessing this product. It was too slow. The digital developments developed in Africa thanks to mobile operators, but it's not yet a key priority. So users didn't initially understand that what we were proposing would make it easier for their users to access domains, content, etc. We also had an issue with the acquisition of resources. When you work on your own, you don't really know how to get an IP address, how to access IXPs, and it slowed the development of activities. Another key challenge was the cost of internet connection. It's very expensive because all the content coming from outside was costly and users had to cover the cost. But we worked step by step, looking at the needs of the market. Instead of approaching just one operator, here's what I suggest: to be more independent, especially when you're talking about content. I think that most mobile network operators tend to be international, multinational companies, and they channel content coming from big companies. And content coming, for instance, through Facebook was funded by advertising. it made it problematic to support local content because you couldn't really secure enough clients or enough access. So what we did was to develop production, to create local content, because as we said, the challenge was to make people interested in what is local, not just the external provision. So we worked hand in hand with the local industry, for instance, the cinema industry, theatre, film, and other programs, entertainment programs, and we also help them because quality is important in the digital era. So we develop platforms to host content, and you've seen examples of our products. And the lack of content was a challenge we had to overcome. So we tried to foster the creation of this content and to generate a local income as well. Because somebody who comes to your platform to access a content that takes 2 hours to get won't come back. So how to tackle this type of challenge? Well, we realized that we need our own infrastructure. So we developed a data center, which is independent from any operators. It's based here in Kinshasa. And we've been supported by ISPA and FranceIX. We secured our own IP address. And thanks to the BGP resources, we're limitless. We can be accessed from anywhere. We're therefore developing potential audience. But it also means that we really need to step up in terms of quality. We developed a video hosting platform and looked at other applications. The fact that we're present at the IXP meant that we had reduced access costs. Clients don't necessarily pay less, but for the same cost, they've got an improved quality. So that's an improvement compared to what the market can offer. Besides, being based locally means we're closer to resources. So we're accessible for the local market as well as the international market. We had to start somewhere, so we focused on the Congolese community, giving them access to their resources so that they feel at home, really. And it meant that gradually investments were paid off. And we were able to easily reduce costs and capitalize because at a local market level, we've ensured that access costs and payment for access costs was based on, for instance, Wallet Mobile, a device widely used locally. However, one of the key costs remains payment. It can't really be a subscription. We've not yet developed this type of subscriptions in the current context, but we've evolved and integrated more solutions. So now there can be local dedicated servers, and that's working well with startups who can post their services on our servers, and we can provide backup for companies. We did a number of tests and proved that it reduced communication costs without having to invest significantly. And it also facilitates inter-company communication. We also developed management applications in link with the needs of our partners, and we approached the manager of our Point CD manager. And it's important because companies do need to have an online identity and have this Point CD visibility, this website. Of course, we've encouraged people to use resources available within our continent. A few years ago, everybody had the .com website, so they needed to go through the United States. Now domain names are changing. It's more democratic, it's easier to access, and we are championing this with our partners. Now, how do we see the future? Well, I think that thanks to this type of exchanges, this type of experiences, we can spread our presence across more African countries, in particular in the sub-region, who may be interested in our content and who could benefit from the quality of the content we're offering. There's a lot of creative talent in our continent. They don't know how to get the right exposure. When you see a film director, he's at a festival, he's presented the movie and then gets forgotten. There needs to be better solutions for better visibility, and it's a challenge that can be facilitated through platforms like our own. Our experience has shown that we can make it affordable for populations, but also accessible. We can clearly generate local content, there's no doubt, and we're open to share our experience to further develop production capacity in the region. And that, I think, is one of the main challenges for our market. So thank you very much for your attention, and we're ready for your questions.
Thank you, Eustache, for this wonderful presentation. I think the DRC is definitely an example to follow in terms of managing IXPs. There's often a question about the development of content, and I think it's a general point. And I think that the experience of NDCs can actually help us share and work together. And MDICIS can also share its experience with those who have launched into the sector for content hosting. What would you say to an operator, for a small operator who wanted to develop content as well, perhaps from Gabon or Congo? What would you be able to say to him? There are lots of operators in Gabon, and we hear lots of solutions, but perhaps it's not always the one that suits us. What would you say to a small operator who would also like to get involved in the development of content? From my experience, the first thing I would say is to ask users to find out what they want. And that way, the regulators will say what regulations have to be respected. Then that allows you to get overcome the barriers to setting up in content development. We had to obtain an integrator certificate for Facebook, and it also allows you to approach other operators and shows with confidence. And if there hadn't been an IXP in Kinshasa, we would not have been able to develop. And I would also say that you must approach the IXPs. They want to, in our experience, people want to set themselves up as competitors to IXPs, but that's not, and operators think that the content is a competitive advantage, and they approach artists, but the model that they're using, sharing revenue with the other with external providers, but wherever the clients are going to reach you, because we can't rely on one fiber optic cable or another. And obviously mobile telephone networks as well. So it's important to approach the IXPs. And the other element I would say, and I'm not an expert in this area, but I would enter strategic partnerships with producers and thinking about clients and identify areas. And because it's musicians, for example, as a in a partnership, you can work together, and that's what I would be able to say from my experience in this regard. Of course, the other important element is it was because we were able to do this with local skills. When you have locally skilled people, the time it takes to implement a solution, it perhaps might, then it takes less time to implement solutions. Sometimes we go around the world looking for the software experts, but actually local skills avoid that problem of the access to other skills beyond your country. And it's much better to reinforce local skills. And we've seen that with academic institutions locally, young people someone who knows how to do animations, design, or write code, we give them the opportunity to also give them the opportunity to launch their careers, and whether that's as an intern, but it's an opportunity to work with us, and that is a good solution. And I would say these are the elements that, and that's the advice I can give to anyone who would like to join that sector. And if you want to talk in more detail, I'm very happy to answer your questions. And that allows you independence, it allows you to grow. That's my advice. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eustache, once again, and for those explanations. And I think that many of the participants here, you are able to get in touch with Eustache if you like, and I'm sure he will share his experience with you. And we're now going to continue with the fourth panelist, and I'm going to hand over to Landry. Thank you for this presentation, and we're going to hand over to the final presenter, who is Mr. Guichard, who is the Director of Posts and Telecommunications and Digital Economy at the ECCAS, Economic Community of Central African States. And he's going to talk about his approach on infrastructure and in relating to his project in Central Africa. And we're going to see the development of infrastructure from this project. Guichard, over to you. Thank you. I'm not sure if you've been able to see the document. Yeah? Not yet, sorry. I thought I had shared this document. Guichard, perhaps you could click on the presentation. I have the file here, yeah. And if you could open it. Can you see it now? Yep. Okay. Thank you, Eustache. for your presentation, and I would also like to thank the organizers of this forum and the partners, and for inviting me to speak about this activity, which is very important and is one of the important elements of implementing our action plan for 2022. And I'm pleased to be able to give you my presentation. It's not always, of course, being last to give my presentation, I've been following the other bits of information, so that makes, I integrate that into what I'm going to say. So what I would like to, just talk about the actions that we have been doing in terms of with the aim of filling the gaps that are in the infrastructure in Central Africa. What is the ECCAS? It's a economic community of Central African states, which was created in 1989. It's a regional sub-region of Africa. The population is 180 million people, and you can see the surface area of over 6 million square kilometers. We have 7 French-speaking countries: Chad, Cameroon, Gabon, CAR, the Congo, and the DRC, Burundi, and we have Guinea Equatorial, as well as Sao Tome and Principe, where we speak Portuguese, and English-speaking country is Rwanda and Equatorial Guinea. And I would like to give you, present the stages of this project that we had to follow, and the instruments, the strategic instruments that we use to implement this within for the state, the member states, to create the EECAS. So you can see that it's a sub-region, and you can see the difference between sub-regional organizations and continent-wide organizations. In terms of policy, our plan at the moment is we have a strategic plan for the long term and up to 2025, which establishes the significant actions that we're going to take, and ITC developments is one part of this focus of this implementation of physical infrastructure that we want to install. And as you can imagine, other sub-regions have their targets, but in terms of the development of sectoral policies, we're trying to build IT infrastructure in the economy around our strategic objectives. I'm not going to go into the details of these various efforts, but these documents are available, and you'll be able that you can consult them. And in terms of the African Union, there has been there was a world declaration at world level adopted in 2005, which is an action plan. And this policy is behind the strategy, which then was behind the strategy for development, and gave us a program for the development of infrastructure for broadband, fixed broadband. And by implementing this program, we have developed a direct system for electronic communication. And so for all member states of ECCAS, our processes should use these documents to develop their infrastructure programs. Member states involved in the have been involved in drawing up these documents and have agreed to these documents. So there is an agreement of interconnectivity between across the countries, and it's a community document that that has created this plan together. That we've created this plan together, and it was adopted in 2020 in our community. We've got project ideas within that strategy. I'm not going to go into more details, but today I'm going to talk about we need to identify project plans so that we can mobilize resources to implement these projects. So that's the stages that the member states have gone through to implement this process overall. So I'm just with talking about PACDIS in particular. It's a project with which is focused on 5 different areas. The programs that we're most interested in, of course, we want to support the implementation. You can see that we want to build infrastructures in communities and state and member state countries, and you can imagine that each member state must have a national strategy for infrastructure, but also, as you can imagine, each member state is responsible for their backbone. But as a supranational organization, we are able to connect beyond the nation state, and for each member state. Each member state must make this backhaul available, because the last stage means that you can connect to the span beyond your border. And for as I said, the work has been done with the local, with the governments of each country, and the infrastructures. Community infrastructures have been identified in each member state. For some countries, the ECCAS have offered information to support these projects where, for example, they didn't exist before. And we're going to approach certain partners in order to implement these projects. Within the member state, the idea is to implement a program of interconnectivity, in particular the capitals of each member state, and that's really because obviously the fiber optic is not going to be from Brazzaville or to another city. There's so many where that exists already, for example. But for example, from the Gabon, there is a connectivity already exists between one city and another. And by using this, by means of this program, we're going to connect cities, Labinda to the Busela. And And the document itself, you will see all the diagrams showing all the connections available. And I can't go into all of these because I've got a limited time, but you will be able to see, and you'll see the kilometers and and this document is available to anyone who would like to see this document. You just have to email me and you'll be able to see it. A third program relates to supporting the digital economy, and it's there that we will see the IXPs. They're a part of that infrastructure in each member state, and there's been we've established what the situation in each country regarding IXPs. They aren't all operational, but there are 3. But we are not limited just to IXPs within each country. No, we want to open our we want to cover the whole space of our regional organization. And as with regard to one of these projects, ACDIS, there are 2 member states who were able to benefit from this, from IXPs, Brazzaville and in Gabon. And as you know, implement infrastructure is one thing, but to do that beyond the border is another thing. So perhaps we need to look at why these infrastructures. How do we have these sub-regional infrastructure? Do we need support? All these aspects have been reviewed by implementing this project in terms of the digital economy. And we cannot develop content if we don't have this digital the economic support. Another aspect is the data centers, and we're trying to establish national data centers, but also regional data centers. And this choice will be made in the course of events, depending on the traffic in each area. It won't be a specific choice. It will depend on the traffic, and it will be a strategic decision based on regional data and whatever is happening in one country or another. But certainly the choice will reinforce one operational, the strategic decision. And in terms of infrastructure, if there is a the third program are support for is the element of support. It's findings of a study. Well, from one study, the findings were that it applies to the whole of Africa. That project, who are the project owners? And what has been found is there's a lack of planning in terms of project. There have not been projects where member states have got together, and therefore we're not going to find finance or partner with a coordinated project, and you need to have skills to do so, so that potential partners can assess the project. All partners involved in the development of infrastructure they will make their decisions based on findings, and the process of implementation will be determined by that. It's a very it's a okay, it's a very interesting subject, but can we perhaps wrap up here so that we can allow questions, and you can see here the actions that the ECCAS will conduct to complete the actions up from now until 2025. So to fill the gaps in planning and infrastructure, digital economy, and also the need to harmonize national policies, ITC policies, and also to regulate the cost of roaming in Central Africa. And there've already been agreements signed in that regard. And we would also like a monitoring faculty which would provide information about each country, and allow potential investors to see where they can potentially invest. And I'm sorry, I can't go too much into detail, but there you are. Thank you very much. And sorry to push you to the end, but it's a dynamic subject, and we're going to move to the conclusion now, the concluding remarks. And thank you for your presentation and on the initiatives and the actions which will be implemented with regard to infrastructure in each individual country and the region as a whole, which will all improve help to improve the problems we have. But we're therefore now going to ask each panelist to ask certain questions. I will just...
So I'm going to look at the questions. Which entity will be best? So Samuel, a question for you, as you've seen in the chat. Examples of good practice. Guichard will also know that key stakeholders of a digital economy, such as Meta and Google, have started to develop their own approaches, and they are reaching us. So we'd like to know what strategic regional position public powers are considering, so that these initiatives can be really beneficial for all stakeholders. Can we also get an idea of a local content? And that's something that will be more for Samuel. Samuel talked about the content, but what would be the position, for instance, of Meta, Google, or other key players who will be present in our ecosystems? And what's the best economic model? And that's open to all panel members. The best economic model to have an IXP which will grow, thrive, rather than something more ad hoc or punctual. And there's a question of ambassadors. What's the place that public powers could play? How could they contribute to the development of data centers? What kind of support could be put in place in terms of support to infrastructure? So I would like to invite all of you to share your perspective, maybe 1 minute, 1 minute 20 each for the panel members. Samuel? Okay. Talking about the entity, the first question, when there's a lack of dynamic to support the creation of an IXP, the regulatory powers can intervene to make it possible and efficient, possibly by creating a fairly straightforward and simple structure. IXPs can become quickly complicated to handle, and you end up handling the structure more than the IXP itself. So it's important to have a simple, neutral structure that won't be in competition with members, because if you start competing with your own members, it's not going to work. And that's, I think, the key to success. The IXPs that work all work along these lines. Thank you very much, Samuel. Guichard, a few words maybe on the public policy question? Guichard? Your microphone was muted. Yes, thank you, Eustache, for the question. When it comes to public policies, if you had a glance at the penultimate slice, the ECCAS is committed to foster a favorable environment supporting innovation, which should attract investors. The aim is to make sure that there's no hindrance to the dynamics, or to ensure there's no that the regulations are not too much of a constraint. All stakeholders that are part of the ecosystem also need to be agents, actors in the development of the implementation. I'm talking about civil society, governments, but also researchers. All views need to be considered, and I think that's the best way to create a favorable environment to foster a successful ecosystem. Thank you very much, Guichard. Last question from one of our participants. The first speaker talked about a lack of access to ASN. What's the cause? Is it regulation? Is it communication companies that are reluctant? And how to address the problem? Who would like to answer? I think that I was the one who raised the question. Samuel? Some countries have almost banned access to an ASN for hospitals or radios, and it's a real shame. And that's a regulation that needs to be scrapped. For information in Europe, regulators have no interest in ISPs, or they don't prevent anybody from accessing an ASN. In France, the very concept of operator doesn't require that you declare yourself as an operator. So any company can operate as such. The more flexible you are, the easier it will be. And each state needs to be more flexible and liberalize on the matter. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you to all the members of our panel. Thank you very much, Landry, who co-hosted with me. We know that there are a number of questions, but we're mindful of the time, and discussion channels will remain open. So we're sorry that we haven't been able to answer all your questions live, but they can be answered in the chat. The conversation can continue. Thank you very much to Landry for co-hosting with me. And I would like to now invite him to say a few words. and mention the sponsors who supported the event. But before that, one last survey, because we would like your feedback, your views on this event. So if you're ready, can we please launch the last poll, the last survey? So we would like to have your feedback, your rating of this event, so that we can further improve what we're offering and meet your needs and offer something that is relevant to you, because we want to work together and contribute together at the development of our ecosystem. So thank you very much for this feedback. I see that there's very positive feedback. Thank you so much. Give you a few more moments. Please don't hesitate to share your point of view. It will really help us offer you something even better next time. Okay. So let's continue with this event on peering and interconnection in Central Africa. As you've seen, this forum benefited from contribution from prestigious panelists, and we were very grateful for them for sharing their experience with us. Landry, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Jean-Baptiste. As we mentioned earlier, we'd like to thank all our sponsors who supported this event. Team Kimro with Samuel Mouchiri. We would also like to thank PEX with Wouter van Hulten. We would also like to thank Meta with Ben Ryle and Andrew Basco, and we'd like to thank FranceIX and Brisaba. And last but not least, we'd like to thank our interpreters and FlexOptics, Fagas McKay and Portia Rabonda, without whom this event could not have been interpreted into another language. Thank you very much, of course, to all the participants, to all the people who took part in this event. Now, Jean-Baptiste, the floor is yours for the closing remarks. Thank you very much, Landry. Thank you to each and every one of you, sponsors, moderators, panelists, and participants. It was a real pleasure to contribute to this forum on peering and interconnection in Central Africa, on the topic of how to face and overcome obstacles to the development of peering and interconnection infrastructures. Thank you to each and every one of you, and goodbye. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you and goodbye to everyone. Thank you.